Welcome to Discovering. We're on the shores of Lake Superior. We're not fishing, we're not sightseeing, we're looking for gold.
Once we've got the dirt collected, we'll run it through the sluice, which is lined with a ribbed rubber mat. And that mat will allow the heavier material, specifically the gold, to settle out into the bottom of those ribs.
And we'll take a trip to the east end of the UP and visit the Great Lakes Boat Building School. That's all tonight, so kick back, put your feet up. It's Monday night and time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
The Upper Peninsula might not be the first place you think of when talking about prospecting for gold, but indeed it's here. Gold that has been pulverized by glaciers unpredictably washes up on the shores of Lake Superior in varying degrees and locations. In 2009, the DNR passed new rules allowing individuals to prospect for gold on state-owned lands on a recreational basis.
So when we start out looking for the gold, we'll do a few sample pans to see what kind of dirt we've got. And to pan it, you're simply classifying the material by weight, because the gold's so much heavier than everything else. Even though it's extremely small, it will tend to settle to the bottom of the pan. So as we classify the material, we'll then slough the lighter material off the top, and that will get us down to our concentrated material. We always pan into a little tub so we're not using the lake, and so that if we accidentally tip the pan, we don't lose any gold we may have collected in there. And a lot of people, when they start panning, will tend to be very, very careful to not run any gold out. But from what I've found, there's no way to keep it all in the pan, but we try and keep as much as we can in there. There's a lot of videos you can watch online to learn how to pan. If you watch any of the prospecting shows, they'll tend to show you some pretty good techniques as well. You'll see when we classify this, the lighter white and yellow sand will come to the top, and that's a good indication that you're classifying it properly. That every time you do it, you'll see that lighter material come up to the surface. All of the gold that we get here along Lake Superior is glaciated gold that's come down from Canada. It's been pulverized by the glaciers for the last few millennia, so it's gotten crushed up and is quite small, but it's actually pretty plentiful. When we're looking for it here along the beach, we'll look into the black sands that you see which are actually a mixture of hematite, magnetite, and iron sand. And all of those heavier materials hold the gold. The gold's actually pretty transient here on the beach. The wave action can affect it day to day as to whether a spot's good one day and not so good the next. There's actually gold along most of the shore of Lake Superior. Some of the better concentrations, though, tend to run from the Two-Hearted River on the east to Grand Marais on the west. We've got one little speck in this pan, but that's an indication we're in the right spot. If we're pulling out pieces like this, and this is a small piece of gold. It's the size of about the size of a flour grain, but that's what we tend to get on the beach from the gold that's been pulverized by the glaciers. We found a little bit of gold with our test pan, so now we're going to bring our sluice down and see if we can get a little bit more. The setup we have is a recirculatory system to try to do our best to follow the regulations that the state of Michigan set. We can't have a system that draws or pumps water directly into or out of Lake Superior. So we have a system set up here with a small commercial style sluice that runs a bilge pump out of a boat connected to a 12-volt battery. We collect all the tailings in the bucket so they don't gum the pump up, and then the water just recirculates through. Prospecting along the shore of Lake Superior, you'll want to look for the concentrates of black sand, mostly located between the Two-Hearted River and Grand Marais. There's plenty of places to access the beach and take a look for it. If you're going to be out prospecting, make sure you check with the DNR to make sure you're following all the regulations that they set for. This sand, if you see some of the reddish hue in it, it's the iron. And actually almost all of this black sand is a magnetite. And you can tell that as you're prospecting it, you can actually hold a magnet to it and the sand will stick right to the magnet. We're trying to just get this thin top layer for two reasons. One, so we don't disturb too much of the beach. And two, the black sand tends to be in layers only about 1/4 inch deep. And then when you get down to the lighter sand that's underneath it, it won't hold the gold. One of our goals when we're prospecting like this is to make sure we're as gentle on the beach as we can. We want to make sure everybody can come out and enjoy this. The rule I have is try to never do any more environmentally than a kid would building a sandcastle. And when we're done running these tailings, we'll actually replace the dirt from right where we got it. Once we've got the dirt collected, we'll run it through the sluice, which is lined with a ribbed rubber mat. And that mat will allow the heavier material, specifically the gold, to settle out into the bottom of those ribs. And it'll allow the lighter material, the sand, rock, and other quartz-based stuff that we don't want, to run down into the bucket, where we can then replace it right back onto the beach. And you kind of have to learn through trial and error based on the sluice that you have, amount of water flow that you have, how steep you need to set it, and how fast you can run the dirt through it. And it's all a experimentation process. There's no real good rule for it. You can run a small recirculating sluice. One of the most popular methods though, and the cheapest and easiest, is just to go out and pan. If you come out prospecting on Lake Superior, there isn't one hot spot to stay with. If you look along the beach with the wave action and the erosion, the beach can change from day to day, and so can the spots with the gold concentration. Whereas great one day may not be so great the next, and where you weren't finding any before, you might find a whole bunch the next time out. Last summer when my son and I were walking the beach looking for agates, we happened to cross a pretty good patch of the black sand. And when I looked at it and realized it was the heavier material, I told him I figured there might be some gold in it. And we both sort of laughed about it. Well, we got about 200 yards further down the beach, and there were 3 people with shovels and a couple sluices. And at that point it seemed more intriguing than humorous, so we met up with them later and saw what they had collected and realized it was a viable hobby and just a fun way to spend a day on the lake. At this point, we're cleaning the mats out of the sluice after our first run of dirt, and hopefully this will be a little more concentrated material. Today wasn't our best collection day. We only found a few flecks. Sometimes when you're getting a little bit better dirt, this is the result you can get from about 10 gallons of beach dirt. Run that down to just a little bit of concentrates and there'll be a few hundred flecks of gold in there. They're all quite small, just flower grain size, but they add up and look nice in a little vial if you can show off to your friends. One of the rules the state sets is that you're only allowed a 1/4 ounce of gold per person per year. And I think even if you were out here every day, all day, during the summer, you'd never get there. So it's not something you'll ever get rich doing, but when you're on a lakeshore like this, on a day like this, it really doesn't matter.
South and east from Lake Superior, on the shores of Lake Huron, you'll find the small town of Cedarville. And it's there you'll find the Great Lakes Boat Building School. It's the only licensed proprietary school of its kind in the state, and one of only 4 in the entire country. The Great Lakes Boat Building School is the ideal place to learn the art and craft of wooden boat building.
The school was founded 8 years ago. We are one of 4 major boat building schools. There's 2 on the East Coast, one in Maine and one in Rhode Island, and there's one on the West Coast out on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. We are a 2-year vocational style program. Our students come because they want to learn traditional boat building methods and make a career out of it. And we very proudly have a very high percentage of placement, over 90%. I think it's almost 97% of our graduates go on to be placed in woodworking, boat building shops, maybe restoration, a lot of new construction. This boat here has been the kind of the signature project for our first year students. It's a very traditional boat. It's called a Cornish pilot gig. And that refers to Cornwall, England, where they were first developed. And it's a gig because it's a rowboat. It's a 6-man rowing boat, 6 men, 6 oars, and a coxswain. And the significance of this boat is that we are building it for the U.S. Navy, and it will be part of the USS Constitution. The crew will be using it for exercise, for training, and there's a number of these gigs on the East Coast, so they'll also be competing in rowing races. That's what they're used for these days. In the old days, they were used to ferry the pilot from shore to ship. So we got this commission from the Navy, and we started it in January, and we're just getting it finished up now. We started with fairly sketchy plans because we did not have the complete plans. But we had enough to get started. We lofted the boat. That means we drew it out full size, and from that we can make our full-size patterns for molds and pieces like the stem and the keel, the transom. The keel is made out of an African hardwood called iroko, and we chose that because it's a very dense, hard, very durable wood. That was set up on the stocks you see there. The boat was built right side up, and then the molds were put in, and then the planking. And the planking is Port Orford cedar. You can see that it's perfectly clear, long length cedar that we're using. Port Orford is a denser cedar than the local white cedar, so it's more appropriate for this boat. It's also a really nice, high quality wood to work with. And after the planking was completed, then we put in the frames. There's 64 bent frames in the boat. They're spaced every 6 inches. If you look close, you can see copper nails. The planks are clench nailed together. That means it's got a copper nail that goes through the laps of the plank and then is bent over. That's called clenching. and then the frames are riveted in. That's very traditional style of mechanically fastening the parts together. Right now they're working on the inwales. You can see the one on the starboard side there. They're working on the port side. Once the inwales are in, then we'll install the thwarts. There's lots of knees that help make the structure very strong. We'll start the painting process also. The hull is going to be painted dark navy blue with a yellow shear strake, and the name, which goes on the side here, will be painted in yellow also, and the name is August Glory. And August Glory refers to the first sea battle that the Constitution had, and when it was victorious over the HMS Gruyere in 1812. So the Constitution took part in the War of 1812, and that was its first victory at sea. So this boat is called August Glory. Our first year students work mostly on traditional style boats, plank-on frame, solid wood boats. Our second year students do a type of boat building we call wood epoxy composite. And this is an example of a project that our second year students do. It's a more of what we would call a glued boat. We rely more on epoxy adhesives than on mechanical fasteners. This is a replica of a 1926 Hacker Gold Cup racer. This is the second one we've built. And you can see it's an all mahogany boat. It'll be all varnished. What we are doing on this boat is we're doing all the woodwork, and then it will go to a professional boat builder who will install all of the mechanicals, the engine, and all of that. And he'll also do the finish work, the staining and varnishing of the boat. So this one will also be ready at the end of this week. So it's almost done. This is a little different than what we have done in the past. This is a fiberglass hull, and we are doing all of the woodwork on it, the deck, the wheelhouse, all of the interior. And we're doing this for a group in Alanson called the Inland Water Route Historical Society. They're on the Crooked River there in Alanson, and they're going to use it as an excursion boat as part of their waterfront activities. They're part of, they have a little maritime museum there. So they bought the hull, and we're doing all the woodwork, all the mechanical installations on it. And this is a 2-year project. This year we got the deck on and some of the interior framing and sole. And next year we'll build the wheelhouse and finish it out. It'll have a wheelhouse similar to that, but instead of a permanent cabin here, it's going to have an awning type enclosure over the top here, and it'll be open. This is a sailboat that we've built over the last 2 years, and when we build a sailboat, we also build all the spars for it. And up here you can see the mast for it, and the boom and gaff are up there, and you can see the rigging is in place. So this year we did all the rigging for this boat, and we also made the sails. So that was something else that added to the curriculum here. When we do a sailboat, we can do pretty much everything, from the rigging and the sail making and all of that. So it'll be a complete boat when we're done at the end of this week. Yeah, the canoe we built this year. First year students do a little bit of wood epoxy work, and so this year we just built a strip plank canoe. It's all epoxy coated and then varnished over that. We have the seats to install, and then it'll be finished. Boat building has always been a small part of sort of the woodworking trades. I started 40 years ago in Maine and England, and at that time, you know, everybody was saying, why do you want to do that? You know, wooden boats are dead, fiberglass has replaced them. But 40 years later, we're not only still building wooden boats, we're still training young men and women to be wooden boat builders. There's a very active, although small, marine trade in wooden boat building, and that's why we're able to place our graduates. We don't graduate a lot of students, usually 15 to 20 a year, and that's pretty typical of the other schools also. But there's always a demand. We have a job board here, and we post jobs as they come in. We also work pretty hard to place our students where we think they're going to be successful. So if we really feel someone would be better going to the East Coast to a certain yard there, we'll try to make contact with that yard and help them out in any way we can to get them a job there. We have students working at maritime museums taking care of wooden boats. We have students in restoration shops. There's still enough new wooden boat building to take a few every year. So even though it's a small niche in the kind of the marine trades or even the woodworking trades, we're able to find places for these students.
This upcoming weekend is Free Fishing Weekend here in Michigan, and you'll find a variety of events to go with it. The Hiawatha National Forest will once again be sponsoring Kids Fishing Day on Saturday, June 13th at the Camp 7 Lake Campground. The entire event is free and open to youngsters aged 16 years and under, and draws between 250 and 300 kids a year. Registration begins at 11 a.m. and runs until 1 in the picnic area, and the event lasts until approximately 3:30. Also on Saturday the 13th, the Beatty Knot Great Lakes Sport Fishing Club will be holding its annual Angler and Young Angler Tournament in Escanaba's Ludington Park. The event is part of a series of tournaments taking place throughout the country. Entry fee is $150. Three-person teams will consist of one adult angler and anglers 17 years old or younger. Over $7,000 in prizes, including a first prize of a new Lund boat, motor, and trailer. There will be barbecue for all participants following the weigh-in. If you're further west in the UP, head for Lon and catch the 10th Annual Baraga County Lake Trout Festival. The event combines the Keweenaw Classic Fishing Tournament with a variety of family-oriented events. The fishing tournament features separate classes for lake trout and salmon, with many cash and merchandise awards. All events will take place at the Waterfront Park and Marina in downtown Lawrence. This event also takes place on Saturday the 13th. Well, that's it for tonight. If you'd like to keep tabs on what's coming up on Discovering or see where we've been, you can join us on Facebook or go to 906outdoors.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Discovering.